I have a question.
All right, perfect. So welcome to our first of 3 parts discussing DFS units. So we're going to go through each of the 3 units. This first part, we're discussing investigation units. So Amanda Kivler is here from Newcastle County. So Amanda, if you want to introduce yourself to us, and then feel free to take it away.
Sure. So some of you might have worked with me under my maiden name, which is Gore. So I've been here for 3 years this month. I have always been in investigation. So when I first started, the investigation units got a little bit of everything. So I had your routines, your urgents, and then we kind of broke it down to specialized units. So I've had your routine cases, then I moved over to only taking urgents. And now at this time, since about October of 2020, I have been taking substance exposed infant cases. So I've kind of done a little bit of everything with the exception of the serious injury investigations. So Lauren had kind of provided me with some questions that you guys have in general. So I kind of figured I would just kind of touch base on those questions. And then if you guys had anything specific that you wanted to know about investigations, I would do my best to answer them. So every single case that we get, it starts with a hotline call. So we have a hotline here in Newcastle County as well as downstate as well. So we get calls from all over, and basically the intake worker, they talk to whoever's calling the report in. And we have screening tools. So everything that we do is under safety organized practice. And we have these tools called the structured decision-making tools, which it is scientifically based. So the hotline worker will take the report, take all of the information. So we need names, approximate age or date of birth. We need an address. We can't accept a case if we don't have an address or a full name to be able to find an address. So then it's reviewed, and then there's little check boxes basically where we check off, okay, was there an injury? How old of the child, like how old was the child that had the injury? Was it a substance exposed birth? Was it for abuse? Was it for neglect? So all the little check boxes are clicked, and then it's kind of determined, okay, is this going to be accepted? If it's met our criteria, then it gets screened in, and then they have levels of urgency. So our routine cases, or what we call priority 3, those have a 10-day response period. Those are cases that generally come in like, you know, maybe a school calls and says something along the lines of, oh, Johnny's always hungry. You know, he expressed that he doesn't have a lot of food in his house, or maybe a case comes in saying that a child had some sort of injury, but it's not recent. There's no mark or bruise, maybe happened at some distant point. Nobody really knows when, kind of stuff like that. Then we have our priority 2. Those are a 72-hour response period. So that might look like maybe a 16-year-old who has a scratch or a small mark or bruise, or maybe something to, like for me, like with my substance exposed infant cases, a P2 is always going to be a baby who's not being discharged within 24 hours. So it might be a really bad case, but the baby's going to be in the hospital for an extended period of time. And then we have our priority 1s, which is a 24-hour response period. Those are our immediate imminent risks. There is a child under 11 who has a mark or a bruise. Child has been admitted to a hospital. Substance exposed infant, the baby's going to be discharged within the next 24 hours. It's winter and there's no heat in the home, no working facilities or utilities in the home, stuff like that. So, and when I say we have this certain amount of time to do a response, basically our response is we need to meet with the victim child. We need to meet with the caregiver. We have to see where this child lives. So we're going and doing a home assessment. We're seeing, does the house have running water? Does the house have food? Does the house have electricity? Do the kids have an appropriate place to sleep? Is it a hoarding situation? Is it safe in the house? So those are the things, like for a response, like you have to have those, you have to have done that. You have to have talked to the victim child and a caregiver and completed a home assessment for it to be considered meeting your response period. So I guess let's kind of roll into what a DFS investigation response actually looks. Oh, sorry, I see the little question. I didn't see that before. So who determines the priority level and how quickly does that happen? So the hotline and the hotline supervisors are the people who determine that. So that is one role I haven't done with DFS, so I can't really speak to that fully, but the tools, they kind of kick out what they think the response should be. And obviously, like an intake worker has to really look at it though, because you know, we as the humans and the people actually reading the situation have the ultimate decision to say, nope, this has to be bumped up, or no, this doesn't meet our requirements. But so the hotline worker will make that initial decision, and then the hotline supervisors have to review it. And sometimes on that level, they will change the priority level. So hopefully that answers your question.
Amanda, do you mind if I ask a follow-up question to that?
Sure.
How do you, as the investigator, become informed of the priority level?
Yep. So we have what is called a rotation. I think the simplest way to describe it is, like I said, we're broken down into units. So for me, I'm in a substance exposed infant unit. So if we have 6 workers taking substance exposed infant cases, we're all on a list. And then as the cases come in from the hotline, they get sent over to the supervisors. So if it's a substance exposed infant case, it goes to Val Thomas and she signs it. If it's an urgent, it's going to go to the urgent supervisor who's up. And at that point, then the supervisor is going to assign it to the worker who's up next on that rotation. So it's a way to ensure that we're all getting basically fair and equal treatment. Like not one person is getting 6 cases and then the next person's only getting 1. So that's how they come into us. And usually there's like rounds. So if there's 5 supervisors who get routine cases, that case will go to that supervisor who's next on the list, and then they assign it to the worker who's next on the list. I think that's the easiest way I can explain the rotation and how we get the cases. So it starts with the supervisor. The supervisor will review it, and then it gets sent over to us, and then we check it out and get started on our role. So basically, when a case comes to us and it's on our desk, it's on our work list, what we end up doing first is obviously we read the hotline. So we start asking ourselves questions like, okay, who's present? Who's the caregiver? Where does the child live? What happened based off of this report? So we kind of formulate some questions to ourselves first. And then the first things that I do as an investigations worker is I always check focus. So I want to run mom and dad through focus. I want to run the kids through focus. I want to see what kind of history they already have with us. So if Johnny comes in with a black eye on my case and I see in 2017 he had almost an identical situation, or you know, if it's a substance abuse type of case, like I want to see, okay, well, have they had this history before? And I can see, oh, okay, in 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019, they've continuously had substance-related cases. So I always like to keep that in the back of my mind too before I respond to the actual case. Oh, can I explain focus? Well, I really can't, but I can. Focus is our database. It used to be called Facts, and then they switched over to Focus. And it is just it's our database. So all of our cases are in there. We like when we add a person, they stay on Focus. So they get a person ID number. They then like anything that comes in. So like say for example, like I guess we'll just stick with Johnny. So Johnny A, he is in Focus. I type his name in. He's got a person ID number. So anything linked to him, any cases he's been involved in, anything like that, that's all in the database. So I'm able to go into old cases. I'm able to see all that information. It holds anything that we've uploaded into a case. So like court orders, collaterals that we've received from a doctor, anything like that, it's all uploaded into that one single system. So after I check Focus, then I also get on to Delgis and I run anybody over the age of 12 through Delgis to see if they have any type of criminal history. So substance exposure is kind of like substance abuse is kind of like a big one for us here at DFS. So, sometimes a parent might not have any prior cases regarding their substance abuse. So I don't see anything in Focus and I say, okay. Then I hop over to Delgis and then I see, oh, okay. In May of 2020, they were arrested with 20 bags of heroin in the car, or they continuously have like marijuana and marijuana paraphernalia charges. If it's a domestic violence case, I might be able to see that the perpetrator has other offensive touching or violent type charges to be able to keep in mind when I'm talking to them. I might be able to see like, oh, mom and dad have had 4 domestic disputes in the last 2 years. So I always like to check that and I usually like, so we have like manila folders, and usually I like to write on the inside little keynotes to myself. So I'll write like little hot topics like, okay, yeah, 2018 paraphernalia charge, or 2012 DV charge. I'll put little notes like that so that when I'm talking to the families, and I'm asking them specific questions and they say, oh no, I've never been in trouble. I'll say to them, oh, well, what happened in 2012 with this situation right here? And then that gets them kind of talking. So that's why we always try, we can't always do it, but we try to always at least do the Focus history and Delgis check before we go out in the field. Because then we're kind of calling people out saying like, hey, well, we already saw this, so let's talk about it. So after we do that, depending on what the case looks like, the priority level, what the situation was, typically our first line is to go to the kids. So we want to talk to the kids. If they're at school and we know like the schools who called it in, or we know what school they go to, we want to go sit with them, talk to them at the school and say, hey, what's going on? I see you have a black eye. Can you tell me a little bit about that? We like to ask the kids by themselves because they're a lot more open to talking when mom and dad's not sitting there staring at them or in the next room hovering, maybe listening to what they have to say to us. So typically we try to start with the kids. Granted that they're age appropriate, stuff like that. And we always build a rapport with them. I should have uploaded this so I could show you better, but like we have these, basically they're little cheat sheets, I call them, of how to ask questions to the kids, because sometimes conversations get off topic, you lose your train of thought. So this really helps like us as workers to kind of get back to it. So with kids, usually when we're out there investigating, we start with rapport building. We want to ask, hey, what's your name? Oh, I see you go to ABC Elementary School. What grade are you in? What do you like to do here? So we start with like asking them all about them. And then we kind of get into like, well, who do you live with? Oh, you live with mommy? Okay. What do you like about mommy? What do you like to do with her? And just kind of start asking them questions about everybody that they live with. One of like our lines that we usually kind of get kids talking with is, oh, well, tell me your favorite thing about mommy. What do you like to do? What's the best part about mommy? Oh, she likes to bake cookies and she makes the best lasagna. Wow, that sounds really good. Oh, okay. Is there anything that you don't like or wish that you could change about mommy? Well, yeah, I don't like when I get in trouble. Oh, what happens when you get in trouble? Oh, well, I get a spanking. Oh, okay. Well, what does a spanking look like? And that's kind of how we sometimes get them talking about those types of things. And then we kind of ask kids about, like, oh, well, has the police ever been to your house? Oh, they came? What did they do? Depending on how old the kid is, like if they're a little kid, we want to still find out about drug use in the home. So I can't use with like a 5-year-old, you're not going to say, well, does your mom do drugs? So typically we ask them questions like, oh, does anybody in your house take any medicine that, when they're not sick and maybe it makes them act sleepy or like seem kind of weird, not normal? Most kids will say, yeah, my mom takes a medicine for a headache, or yeah, when she's sick, she takes a cough syrup, something like that. But, other times like kids will say things like, oh yeah, my dad has to have shots. He has to take a shot every day and he always has to take them. And if he doesn't get them, he's really mad. Or, sometimes they'll talk about, oh yeah, well there's cigarettes and everybody fights over the cigarettes. Everybody's always mad and everybody gets mad at my mommy because she steals all the cigarettes and they're special cigarettes. Oh, okay. Why are they special cigarettes? Like what makes them special? So we kind of get information in a way that doesn't seem threatening or, scary to them. They're just talking about their house. They're talking about their life. So typically, like I said, we start with the kids, and then depending on where the interview took place, like if it was at the school, typically then I head over to the home. And then I just talk to the parents. I always try to go in with a really friendly demeanor. I explain what DFS is if they don't already know. And then we always have to keep in the back of our mind as investigators that this is just a report. They're allegations. We don't know that they're true. Even if the child has told us like, oh yeah, daddy beat the crap out of me. He kicked me, hit me with a belt. Even if the kid's already admitted to it, we're not gonna come full force and say, well, I know you did this. So usually I'll sit down, I'll explain that we received a report regarding their family. I'll go over the allegations and then I'll just kind of start out with like, what's going on? I do see the question, Joyce. So do we automatically have permission to interview a child because there's been a hotline report? Yes. So we do not need parental permission. I don't need permission to go to your child's school. I don't need permission to go to the daycare. I am allowed to go speak to them and talk with them. Now, obviously, if I call the parents first, and I'm like, I need to meet with you and your family. If a parent is adamant, like, no, you are not speaking to my kid, I am going to be present. I don't want you at my child's school. I don't want the school to know that you're involved. I generally will respect their wishes. The only time that I do not respect their wishes is if one, they're withholding the child from me, not allowing me to come out and see them. They're not letting the child talk to me in person when I'm with them. or if it is like an injury. If the child has like an injury that I need to see right then and there, I'm going to the school and I'm going to see them.
If they don't let you see them at the school, Amanda, do you then work out with the parent when you will be able to visit? Like, can I meet you at your house after school or something like that?
So yeah, I do try to keep it. I always try to be flexible, and if I'm willing to kind of do a little give and take, parents are going to feel more comfortable and they're going to want to do some give and take with me. So if mom says, no, you can't go to the school, that's embarrassing to me, or I don't know what this is about, I don't know what you're going to talk to my child about, I'm going to say, okay, well, what time's Johnny get out of school? Okay, 2:30. Well, would it be okay if I come to your house around 3 and we can all sit down and talk about this together? So I do try to do stuff like that. It really is a case by case situation though, because if it's something that's really imminent or emergent, sometimes we just still have to make our first appearance at the school. Or to wherever the kid is. It's usually at school, but yeah, I mean, we do try to work around with the parents because we're not there to be enemies. Like it's not DFS against mom and dad. It's mom and dad and DFS against the problem. Like we're not here to say you're a bad mom, like you're a bad dad, or oh, you guys, we're here to say, hey, what's going on? What can we do better at? What needs to happen so we can work through this problem together? So I like to keep that mentality and that demeanor with the family. I don't want to start off ripping and roaring right off the bat where they're not going to want to work with me anymore. Because really, if they don't want to work with me, I'm not going to be able to help them. After I address the allegations with the parents, I ask them like, what's going on? Like, hey, we received this report that Johnny has scratches on his chest. What happened? What's going on? And I usually let them tell me their side of the story. When parents are talking to me, I'm trying to think in my head, well, does that make sense? Does that story add up? Like they look like scratch marks, like from fingernails to me. Does it make sense that he was at the park and fell and got, road rash? I'm asking those types of questions. If there's a substance abuse issue, I'm asking them questions like, how long have you been using? Like, what are your triggers? Have you had any services in the past? Like, what's helped you? What hasn't helped you? Here's what I have to offer. Like, I can get you involved with Brandywine. I can, make you a referral to connections. We can look at options. What's going to work for you? Just trying to think. So with investigations also, if it is an injury case that came in, if we go out cases, there's belt marks on the back. I go out, I see Johnny. He shows me his back. He's got 3 long lines along his back. We're going to AI. So any type of injury, if I go there, there is an actual injury, and the kid saying like, yeah, mom did this, dad did this, we're going to the emergency room. We have to go to AI, and they have to get a SANE exam. So the forensic nurses will come in, the attending physician will come in, and they're doing a full body scan of these kiddos. They're taking forensic photographs of every single mark, every bruise, every scratch, everything that is on there. Okay, so for alleged sex abuse involving older siblings, so any sex abuse case actually goes to the serious injury and sex abuse unit. I don't have experience in those cases, and I'm not really exactly sure of their protocols, so I can't really speak on that, but I do know that they do have, they have medical examinations as far as that type of stuff as well. But I don't have any experience in that particular role. With the injuries also, if we get out there and there's an injury, we have to make a police report. So we are calling the non-emergency line of where the event took place. So not necessarily where you are, but where the event happened. So if the event happened in Wilmington, we're calling Wilmington PD. If it happened, in the outskirts, if it happened in Newark, we're just calling the associated police department that goes with where the actual event was said to happen. Because they're going to also have to come in and get involved, ask questions, get the information from the SANE exam, talk to the parents. Usually if I've called the police, I don't super address the allegations with the parents until the police have been able to conduct their investigation, because I don't ever want to interfere with a criminal investigation, because once you get into marks and bruises, there's always going to be that criminal piece to it. So typically I will let the family know, hey, we got this case. Johnny's got a black eye. He's got to go be seen by the emergency department. I'm going to have to make a police report. So I just need you to stand by, meet me here. Usually I'll have them meet me at the emergency room. And I'll kind of keep things pretty generic, pretty simple with them. This way, once the police officer gets there, we're able to interview together, and I'm not interfering with a possible criminal charge or case. Oh my gosh, there's so much. I just I don't know what direction you guys want me to go. So I guess I mean, if you have specific questions about our response, like I can answer those.
Yeah, if you want to pause, maybe if anybody has questions, we can go, if you want to unmute yourself and we can just kind of ask some specific questions, sort of like a firing squad a little bit of how investigation works. So Charlie, how about you go first?
If you've got a case where the heat is not on in the apartment and it's wintertime and it's just a matter of they don't have enough money, nobody's beating anybody, nobody's abusing anybody other than, not hitting them anyway. What do you do in cases like that?
So a lot of times we, like if it's winter, it's cold, it's freezing, they have no heat, we're going to go out there, we're going to ask, hey, what's going on? Oh, you didn't have enough money to afford your bill. Okay. Do you have a warm place where the kids can go tonight? Let's see what we can do. Let's get them someplace nice and warm and with working utilities until we can get your heat turned back on. So that's when we're going to safety plan or family plan. Maybe kids can go stay with grandmom while mom's able to make phone calls and get that heat turned back on. A lot of times we're pointing families in the direction of 211, trying to get them set up with resources. Sometimes we're able to, we do have a budget in which we can spend money on families. So sometimes we're able to assist, but generally we are trying to point them in directions of other assistance first. So we're going to want them to reach out to 211, Catholic Charity, stuff like that. We want them to exhaust their resources and teach them, hey, like their services out here, like let's work with them first. And then sometimes we'll be able to say like, okay, well, what's the past due? Like, what do you need to get it turned on? And then we have to get it, well, first we kick it up to our supervisor, and then our supervisors have to bring it to administration to get something like that approved. But generally we sit there and we help them try to navigate social services, try to get them in the right direction.
Good. Amanda, can you explain 211 in a little bit more detail?
Well, I can do my best, but basically, if you call the number 211 on your phone, it's all location based. So like if you're in Pennsylvania and you call 211, it's going to be kind of like 911 when like you call it's direct. It's going to connect you to like your locality. But you can call them, and if you need any type of like heating or electricity support, you're looking for housing. So like maybe you need to get into a shelter or you need housing resources. That's where I always have people start, because they're able to connect you to, like the HEPA, like the heating and electricity program, like assistance program. They're able to connect you to what shelters are open, like what do they have available. They can get you connected with programs that we just as DFS, we don't have access to. So they're really a great place to start. And then if like 211's not helping or they don't have anything available, then we keep on moving on to the next avenue.
There's a question in the chat about, are you as an investigator able to transport a child to the hospital?
So we are. So we have to give parental permission to transport. So unless we have already assumed an emergency custody or we've been granted it by the police, we give parental permission. So sometimes it might look like mom's at work, I'm letting her know something happened, we have to go to the emergency room, and she's already out there by AI, but the kid goes to school like in Middletown or Newark or something. I'm already at the school. I'll say, hey, if you give me permission, I'm able to transport. Or if they give me verbal permission, then I just I should have brought my little accordion file with me, but we have like transportation permission forms. So it's a very basic form, but it's just saying that you're giving me as the DFS worker permission to transport this child on this date. And like, you can either put like a range of dates if it's going to be something where, you might have to be taking the child to the doctor appointment for something, or it would be helpful for you to transport them to and from wherever you may need to transport them from. But so if it's just for that particular day, I'm going to be putting 6/2 to 6/2, or 6/2 to 6/15. I'll be putting that on there, and then they'll sign acknowledging that they're giving us permission. If it's a case in which the child lives with the perpetrator and that is the only caregiver, we cannot allow the perpetrator to drive the child to the emergency room. So at that point, that's generally when the police officers get involved, and they'll say, well, they should be able to transport, but a lot of times police officers don't like to, and they kick it to us. So usually the police officer will step in and kind of be like, hey, you can't be alone with a child right now until we've investigated this further. So, give DFS permission, and then they'll sign the form there. And if they refuse, then we can always call an ambulance to transport the child. Or if the police have granted us emergency 4-hour custody to allow us time to file for the ex parte, then we can still transport the child. Anything else that you guys want to know about an actual, like what it looks like when we're out there responding? So,
Janice, do you have a question? You can unmute yourself and ask your question, Janice.
Well, I've had prior experience, family experience with DFS and child custody.
Mm-hmm.
And when you have a child that is kind of like too young to express themselves on what is happening, verbally express themselves, but shows you and tells you.
Mm-hmm.
And DFS comes in and investigates, and I guess they follow up, and the child still stays there in that circumstance.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anybody other than DFS or that worker that investigates to follow up behind that? Because like I said, I've had experience and I want to really go into all the details, but.
So let me just clarify.
Go ahead.
Just to make sure I kind of understand, I'm understanding what you're asking. So basically, like if we were to go out there and we still don't know exactly what's going on, but we deem that at that time the child is safe to remain in the home.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so yeah, we do have services that we're able to put in place. So for kids under the age of 3, there's a program called Parents as Teachers. So we get them involved and they come and do home visits. They work with the family. They teach like some like one-on-one parenting skills. They give advice, to parents of younger children. We have functional family therapy, which is for kids, I believe, 13 and older. Yep.
And okay, I'm talking about a much younger child. So you're saying you have these things, these programs that can be implemented. Is this something that has to be done through the courts where it's court ordered, or you as a worker, you'll say, I'm recommending you do this, and if they don't, are there consequences for that they did not follow through?
There's no simple answer to that, but yes, we are able to put referrals in place. We can't necessarily force a family to do something that they don't want to do. Mm-hmm. But yes, there could be consequences depending upon the situation. It really would be situation dependent. But like we have, like I said, the parents as teachers, we have family interventionists that come in and, they're observing the family. That's not an age specific thing. So we can put those services in place, and those are extra sets of eyes that are going out there and really seeing what's happening in the house. But if they choose not to participate or it's not for them, depending on the situation, we can't really say, well, you have to. If it's part of the case plan, though, which is really kind of moving into more of like a treatment zone, if that's part of their case plan and to move forward out of their treatment program, then yes, there could be consequences like, okay, well, maybe we need to put a safety plan in at this place, or maybe we need to take a step further, and look into next steps. But it's not necessarily, there's not going to be some kind of consequence because you didn't want to work with parents.
Okay, what's next steps?
Depending on the situation. So we have safety plans, and a safety plan is a plan that we are able to put in place where, we definitely think that something's going on. There's some kind of safety risk. There's got to be something saying like, yeah, these kids can't be here or unsupervised here, right? So we have this concern. So a safety plan can look like many different things, but typically a safety plan is maybe you have a friend or a family member who's going to come and stay with you for a little while. They're going to be supervising, observing, providing some kind of caregiving role, making sure, hold on one second.
Okay, go ahead.
Making sure that things, are okay. Or maybe there's an out-of-home safety plan where child's going to go live with somebody else and their contact with mom and dad or their caregiver is going to be supervised. If that doesn't work, or there are no appropriate safety people, because they have to be DFS approved, they have to run their history and focus. We gotta make sure they don't have any DFS history of their own. We gotta check their criminal history. We gotta make sure that they don't have any criminal history that's concerning to us. So if they have appropriate safety people, we're gonna use those people. If they don't have any safety people, there is a safety concern, there is a risk that something bad's going to happen, then we're gonna have to talk about removal and DFS custody.
Okay, I'm gonna leave it there.
Okay, I hope that answered your question.
No, it's okay. I like I said, I've had experience with this, and all the things you talked about, and I've got a different view. I've got a different opinion, but like I said, I'm accept what you're saying because, like I said, you're living it. You're doing. This is what you have right now. Okay.
For the different level of case priorities, do you have teams going out or is it individuals?
So we go out by ourselves. sometimes we're able to bring a partner with us if, you know, we are concerned for our own safety, but typically it's just us going out by ourselves, you know, asking the families all these questions and checking out their homes and all that fun stuff. But yeah, usually we don't partner up. There's not really enough of us to be able to make that a thing that happens all the time. But when safety is a concern for our own safety, then yes, we do partner up.
Amanda, I'm not sure if you know this statistic off the top of your head, but thinking about every time you become aware of a family, so most likely, you know, it's a hotline report, how often do you end up taking custody as opposed to just providing services and putting treatment services to keep the family intact as opposed to taking custody?
I mean, I don't have any type of statistical information on that, but in my own personal experience, we don't want to remove the child if we don't have to. You know, we want to preserve the families. We want to really work with them. So we really try to safety plan. If removal is even somewhat of an option, like we want a safety plan first. We want to give the family the opportunity to try and correct their behavior or get services into place under a safety plan before even thinking about filing. But sometimes that's our last option. I mean, I've been doing this for 3 years next week. And I would say, I mean, it's not a regular occurrence for me. It's like not like, oh, 1 in 5 cases I'm going to file. You know, it's usually quite a bit of length in between me filing. You know, we try to safety plan.
Yeah. So in your experience, there's usually a longer period of time to work those safety plans, let those agreements kind of take place and let the parents respond to what you've asked them to do.
Yeah.
In your experience, you said that you guys do the check focus for history on family. How often do you find that there's been like repeated history on families?
That's a good question. So I don't have any, like, I wish I had statistics to be able to say, like, to give like really good information on that. I mean, a lot of times, yes, we do have families who have been in the system in one way or the other. Maybe, you know, the case that I just got, maybe mom has childhood history. She doesn't have any history of herself as a caregiver, but, you know, she has a history of abuse or neglect as a child. You know, our families, we do have repeat families, but I don't have like I don't have a good answer for that because I don't have the statistics and I don't want to give false information. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I just want to know in terms of just you looking at it, not just numbers or anything, but have you really seen repeated history in families?
Yeah, in my experience, yes. Most of the families I deal with have usually been through DFS on some sort of level.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. I mean, I kind of feel like we hit some of the points that you had sent me, Lauren. I know one of the questions that you had posed to me in our first like email exchange was, what's the difference between an intact family? So an intact family is basically a family that's in DFS custody. So they are not in a safety plan. They are not together as a family anymore. Like we have at least one child of theirs in DFS custody. So that's really the only difference between an intact family and one that's not. Let me see, I'm trying to go over my little list.
Yeah, one of my questions was then, I'm not sure where in the order of my questions they are, but thinking about, so CASAs, for the most part, you know, we only get appointed once DFS takes custody. So thinking about the cases where DFS has taken custody, you are working your investigation, preparing for eventually for a treatment worker to take over. Yep. What are some of the actions that you take as an investigator to prepare for the reunification process?
Yeah. So for me in investigations, realistically in an investigation setting, reunification is unlikely because we come out and we're addressing the immediate needs. We're seeing, hey, did this happen? So for us, really, we're setting the groundwork for the case to go to treatment. So I'm just going to speak on my experience that I'm doing right now with like my substance exposed infants. Okay, so if I have a case where the baby was exposed to like fentanyl and cocaine or something like that, okay, parents are fully engaged in their substance abuse. They are actively using still. They're not in any type of services. They are unable to care for that child. They don't have any safety people. DFS has taken custody. Okay, so I'm going to start laying the groundwork by making those referrals, by getting them either referrals like Brandywine, Connections, laying out what do you need to do in order to get your child back. We need to see X amount time period of sobriety. You need to be in a program and actively engaged and working with the program. So we're making those referrals. We're getting them started. We're setting that initial, like, this is what you have to do if they are currently living in a motel. Okay, in order to get your children back, you need to get involved with Brandywine. You need to work on stable housing. We need to get you set up with services. You either need to get a job, get on unemployment, get something to have some type of stability when your kids come back into your care. So we lay that groundwork, and then we prepare, like usually once we have obtained custody, as investigations, we want to get the case moved over to treatment fairly quickly, because the treatment worker is going to prepare a case plan. So their case plan is a roadmap, really, of what exactly this family needs to do in order to meet that criteria to get the family back together. So we're setting the groundwork, we're preparing the family. I'm very open with my families to say, hey, like, I'm the investigations worker, there's a treatment side to this whole program. So I explain what treatment is. I let them know, so you're going to get another worker. I'm going to talk to that worker, and I'm going to let them know what we've done so far. So we're really just kind of preparing them to move to that next step, so that treatment can really do a full-blown plan with them and with detailed next steps and helping them meet those next steps. Yep.
Gotcha. How often, once that transition happens or is in the process of happening with the treatment worker, how closely do you communicate and work with the treatment worker?
Yeah, so in my personal experiences, usually what we do is when we close the case, we have to do something called a transfer summary, which is like a 1 to 2 pager Word document that has everybody's information. So it's mom, dad, kids, any safety people, or relatives, family members, supports, anybody who's there helping out. And then it's got, why did the case come in, what happened, like a quick snapshot of everything that's happened on our case, so that they, once they first get it, they have that quick read to see what's going on. And then it's called a warm handoff. So basically, I'm preparing the family. I'm saying, okay, Cindy, you're going to be moving to a transfer, or I'm transferring you to treatment. So you're going to have a new worker. Your new worker is Ashley. Ashley's going to make contact with you. She has about 10 days to make a response, but in between, we're going to try to do either a meeting together or a phone call or a Zoom together, so that we can have an open conversation about what's been happening on your case. This way, they're able to know that this new worker knows everything I've done. The new worker has time to ask other questions. So in an ideal world, that's what we like to happen. It doesn't always happen. And if we can't meet with the family together, we do always try to at least have like a conversation between investigation worker and treatment worker to say, hey, this is how my case went. Like, this is what you have to expect. This is what we've already started, stuff like that. I've had cases. So there is a timeline. So I believe it is 10 to 14 days between the investigation and treatment taking over. Usually once my case closes, I know that it's going to take some time. So I leave my into the family to say, hey, you know, Ashley's going to be your new worker, but she has 10, 14 days to reach out to you. So in the meantime, if you have a question, you know, you have my number, it's not going to change, reach out to me. So that's kind of how I help that transition for me personally.
That makes sense. So then you know, during that time period, if they do have questions, they know at least who to ask. And then whatever they ask you, you can certainly relay to the treatment worker once that's assigned. Okay.
Yep. Sometimes it's as simple as, you know, the family's in foster, like the child's in foster care, and the foster care provider says, hey, I've got this birthday party in Maryland. It's 15 minutes away from my house. It's literally right across the border next to Walmart. Am I allowed to take this baby there? Like sometimes it's a question like that, and it's just a quick answer, like, yep, no, or, you know, something like whatever I can answer to them. If it's a quick, just a basic question, I'll be able to answer it for them. If it's something more specific or really needs a more intensive answer, I usually say, let me send an email or call the worker. This way they can touch base with you sooner.
Gotcha. So CASA volunteers are usually appointed either at the preliminary protective hearing or a little bit afterwards, sometimes by the adjudicatory hearing. Is there documentation or anything that the CASA can read about the investigation? Is there a specific form or anything, or is it records in focus?
So typically, in my experience, it's just records in focus. So hopefully the caseworker has everything up to date in their notes so that you can review what has been happening in the initial interview and like the running notes through the case print. I've had really great experiences too where like the CASA has just called me and had like a really nice conversation. That's my preferred method. And I think it's like, I just think it's the easiest, because then sometimes it's hard to make sense of our case notes, especially if you're not accustomed to reading them every day. They can kind of be out of order or confusing. So I always like when I get the phone call and just have that little conversation about, hey, what have I done? What's going on? What's my impression? So I like to do that.
That's great to hear. I'm chuckling because I'm thinking about, I know I read case notes at one point where there was not a single sentence without an acronym, that at one point I had to look up what the acronym was. So that's super helpful. So you don't mind, as an investigation worker, having a CASA who's newly assigned to the case call you and say, hey, can you basically tell me what's going on, tell me everything you know?
Nope. I think that's always the best too. Like I said, it's faster, it's easier. If you have questions, you're able to just ask them right there. I've also had some that just reach out through email, which is that's also fine. Just that direct communication is always the best for me.
Yeah.
And sometimes there's things that aren't necessarily in the notes. Like I had recently had a case where I thought that dad was basically selling mom. But it wasn't a fact, so I can't really put it in my case, but it's a general impression. And it was funny because when I had a FaceTime with the CASA, and they were like, hey, at the PPH, like, this is what I was hearing, and I have this feeling. And I'm like, I also have that gut feeling. So it's kind of nice to be able to have that conversation that maybe necessarily is not overly reflected in our case notes.
Yeah, that makes sense. So things that you don't necessarily have evidence for, but you have those gut feelings.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes, we don't want to ignore them always. So it's good to kind of have the chance to chat about them.
Yeah. And I know that you had a question about, like, how do I prepare for court and to testify? So me personally, and this is how I always train all of my newbies when they're underneath me. What I do before a court case is now granted, so I filed today, literally filed today. So my court hearing is on Wednesday next week. PPH always on Wednesday. And generally you don't even usually have a full week in between your hearings. So your case is pretty fresh in your mind, but it gets chaotic. So usually for me, I read through my initial interview, I read through my case notes, and then I always have a cheat sheet because I get tongue-tied or flustered. So I make a timeline of the date that the case came in and just a quick blurb of why did the case come in, the dates I saw each person, the dates that I did X, Y, and Z. And I just have just like a one-pager timeline of events. This way I can say, I did this on May 25th, or, you know, I saw mom, dad, and this child, but I couldn't see this one because he was at soccer practice, or, you know, I want to be able to have that explanation as to why. Usually at the bottom of that page, I also write everybody's full name and date of birth, because sometimes you're just sitting up there and your mind goes blank when the attorney is asking you a question and you're like, why can't I think of mom's name? I talk to her 50 times a day. So I usually just put that little blurb at the bottom too. Or, you know, sometimes you have kids that have 5 kids and they all start with an A, you know, so I want to make sure I have everybody's name and their age. This way I'm saying the right child's name with the right situation.
That's a really good idea. That's a good kind of tip and trick for just staying organized, especially if it's names that are similar or something like that. That's a really good idea.
Yep. Let's see. I think that was really all of the questions that you had kind of posed to me. So if there's anything else that I can answer, I'm definitely more than happy. And you guys I can put my email in the chat too. So if you do think of questions like afterwards too, you can always reach out to me, and I'm always more than happy to help or, you know, talk a situation out.
Amanda, thank you. I will say, so Amanda is a Newcastle County investigator. So the investigators in Kent County and Sussex County all operate very similarly. You know, we may have not as many divisions further south, but all the investigators are responsible for the same actions and kind of follow the same similar protocols and policies. You know, their ways about doing things might be a little bit different, but Amanda, you're not the first one that I've heard that says, you know, please, if a CASA has questions, like just pick up the, you know, just ask.
Yeah.
It seems to go pretty well that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, hopefully that kind of helped a little bit in providing you guys at least some of your answers.
Yeah. Does anybody have any questions?
No, but I do appreciate what you're saying about having the CASAs feeling free to contact you or to contact the workers, because I wasn't sure. I kind of like hands off or hesitant to contact them. So
yeah, I will say, I mean, thank you guys for everything that you do, because you guys really do make our jobs easier. But I think sometimes too, we have a very new workforce. So sometimes we get these emails or these phone calls and it's like, oh, hey, I'm the CASA. And, you know, sometimes a new worker is like, oh, am I allowed to talk to them? You know, what am I allowed to tell them? So sometimes, like when I first started, I always felt it was nice to, like, when you guys would give us a call and kind of explain your role to us, because there are things, I mean, even me, after 3 years, sometimes I don't know everything that you guys are able to do, or, you know, what your role is on certain situations. So having that conversation, especially if you know it's a newer DFS worker, to explain your role, it really helps us also be able to give you information that works for your specific role, and makes like a new worker feel a little bit more comfortable, like, oh yeah, okay, this is an ally, I can talk to them, I'm not going to get in trouble for telling you information, because we kind of have that panic every time someone emails us like, oh my God, am I allowed to say something to you? I don't know. So I like that.
Yeah, that's a good point. Janice, if you want to unmute yourself, you can ask your question.
Yeah, what is your average caseload? I know I had a case about a year or so ago involving DFS, and trying to work with a family, trying to reunify, and didn't kind of work out. But anyway, what is the average caseload number? You know, because this at that time that investigator or treatment officer, I mean, they were like really, they had cases on top of cases, and I mean, I know that could be burnout, and how much can you really apply or put? What is the average? I didn't know, has it gotten any better, really is what I'm asking. Has it gotten any better?
Yeah, okay, so this is a tricky question in a way. So I will say that COVID has helped DFS get their life under control, because our caseloads are now basically all meeting caseload standard. So for an investigations worker, we're not supposed to have more than like 11 cases. That's our caseload standard. I will say that about a year ago, like right before COVID hit, like we, in the last, like within the last few years, we've really been in a bad situation where we had workers, myself included, in 30, 40, 50 cases. So if our national caseload standard is 11 and I have 43 cases, it is very, very hard. And it comes across in court. I will never forget. This was probably 2.5 years ago. I had 33 cases. And when I started the PPH, I had maybe 20 cases. And I remember Jonathan Harding, he said, wow, like, you know your case inside out, like you were on it, like you're doing, like, gave an amazing testimony. And then a month later, the adjudicatory hearing hits. I really stumbled. It's not that I didn't know what was going on in my case, but I had so many cases at that time, you know, and I was up to 33, probably going to hit 34 that day. And when I got off the stand, Jonathan had looked at me and he said, how many cases do you have right now? And I'm like, 33. And he's like, I can tell. He's like, get back to the office and work on closing some of those cases up. So, I mean, it does come across, and it is hard to manage and keep up when you have so many cases. But I am happy to say that COVID has helped us. And I would say almost all of us are at caseload standard here in Newcastle County.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. And just to share, Jonathan Harding is a DFS attorney in Newcastle, just for anybody who doesn't know. So he's the DFS attorney. Mm-hmm. Yeah, go ahead, Janice.
I don't mean to pick at that, but when you say COVID has helped you guys get where you should be, is that because the kids are not in school and you don't have the teachers reporting or different things? Or you got to remember being locked down for like we were, and even with the hybrid school, how much is being reported, how much is being seen? You know what I mean? So I hear you, like you said, it's been a godsend as far as helping you get your number down. Is that because it's not being, you're not being aware of it? You're not being told, you don't know?
That's definitely a fear that all of us have at this time. Every single one of us, from caseworker on up to administration, you know, there's definitely things that are happening. And it's a scary thought of how much is not being reported to us. But yes, kids not being in daycares and at schools has definitely decreased the reports. But the kids have been back, you know, at least doing like some hybrid in-person learning, you know, since October, really. So we did see things start to pick back up, you know, and as the state opens up more and more every single week, we're definitely seeing that happen. Like we're getting more reports. So it not necessarily is a godsend, because, you know, we are maybe missing things that should be investigated for sure. And I will say that a lot of the cases that we have received during COVID times have been serious, you know, more involved, you know, not as much cases where it's like, you know, miscommunication report, to put it nicely, you know, where we're not going out and saying, oh, well, this didn't happen, so we can close out. You know, usually what we're getting now is the more serious and involved, intricate cases. But we also have been able to hire a lot of people during COVID as well, which has really helped get our numbers down too, because when you only have 5 people taking cases for a whole county, we're all going to be up to 50, 60 cases. So, you know, with most of our units full and people actually working and on full rotation, meaning they're able to take cases, that's also really helped a lot too.
Okay. Thank you. I mean, it's like I said, I know it was no fault of you guys because you're not being aware of. That was just a thought. I mean,
yeah,
glad to hire some people. Glad they got some more people on board, because they were really struggling at one point a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
Thank you.
How did the basically no contact during COVID affect how you guys interviewed and did things like that?
So to be honest, it really didn't. We were still out there doing everything every single day. We had our masks, we kept our distance. We did do like a little presentation. I don't know if some of you were able to be on it, but so really we were out there still feet on the ground, because we can't assess child safety if we're not out there. Like, our eyes have to be in those houses. Like, we have to be seeing families when we're talking to them. We have to lay eyes on these kids. Like, we have to do all of that. We can't say a kid is safe if we're not making contact with them. Mm-hmm. So all of those face-to-faces were still happening. Really, the main thing that changed for us was there was an influx in some virtual stuff, but you know, our initial contact still remained us going out there and seeing these families, and really having our feet on the ground. So yes, we were having a little leniency with maybe like expressing some allegations and setting appointments. With like our routine cases, there were more appointments being made. For me, like in the SEI world, like the substance exposed infants, all my contact takes place in the hospital first. So being able to make those appointments, letting families know, hey, I'm coming, asking them screening questions, and being cognizant of that. But really, we were out there working full force, so.
Oh, I do remember that you did have a session, Lauren, with regard to how COVID affected different departments in different areas. So I remember that you did that.
And Amanda was our presenter there as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, like we're in, especially now that things have started to open back up. I mean, there's been a less of a reliance on like Zoom and FaceTime. So, you know, really most of us are just really operating business as usual.
Yeah, and there's a question in the chat about just less reports last in 2020, and that the answer is yes. And that was a nationwide, you know, experience of just less people reporting. And I don't know, Amanda, if you know kind of percentage wise of who makes reports, but I'm gonna guess it's a good amount of teachers, nurses, doctors.
Yeah, so definitely a bulk of our reports. I don't have a statistic, but a lot of our reports come from schools. I mean, schools, teachers, daycares, there are eyes on the street. Like they're spending time with these kids. They're seeing what's going on. So they really do make up the majority of our phone calls. Those police officers, law enforcement, they also make reports, but really the schools not being open and in person, that really drove hotline report numbers down.
Yeah, and I wonder, I'm thinking that maybe in the next year or 2 or 5, we, the child welfare system, will have a better ability in retrospect to look back on how the COVID pandemic affected child welfare. I think we're still in it a little bit to be able to answer that question, but I'm really interested to learn, because this could be a whole nother training, is about the mental health and, you know, effect, and the educational effect, and all that. I think we just may not know those answers right this moment, but I'm kind of interested to know what that effect, you know, has been.
Even just like sitting on this side of things and making it over a year through this, sometimes I can't even believe, like, oh my God, wow, we've really been doing things like this, or you know, really making that mental connection of like, wow, what an impact all of this has made on how we do, like really what I can think of, and I hope it never changes, I hope we stay with this forever and ever and ever, is like when we do have to file for custody. Before COVID, we used to have to sit there and we'd get our petition like typed up, and it was a billion pages at that point, and we would give it to our supervisor would review, and then it'd get sent over to the Carvel Center, and then we'd have to wait for one of our attorneys to review it, and then they'd call us out there, and we'd have to sit in case review it with, like, they'd go over it with a fine-tooth comb and walk us through it and make any changes, and then we had to race over to the courthouse and actually file it in person, and, you know, getting it in there before 4:30, or if you were granted emergency custody, you have to get your petition in before noon the next day. So racing out there. Now we don't have to do that. Everything, we just send an email, and then it gets submitted to a little mailbox on the family court. And it's been really nice. I hope that we keep that. I do kind of like the aspect of PPHs being virtual. I kind of would like to see some cases remain like a virtual aspect. So some of that's been nice, and it's kind of like, wow, I can't believe we never did this before.
Yeah, it's interesting. And that's such a positive spin on this whole experience, you know, but out of everything we've done for the last 15 months, we've got to find some positives that
Yes.
and we've learned to, you know, learn to adapt and learn to be flexible.
Yeah, for sure. And doing this job, you always have to be flexible, but definitely COVID has really pushed us to our limits on what can we do? Like, how can we make this work? How can we stay safe? How can we keep our families safe? How do we keep our mental health safe? How do we keep our own personal family safe through all of this? So it's definitely increased our flexibility and really made us get creative and shake things up. And, you know, not all changes have been ideal. You know, obviously the virtual contacts, it's not always ideal. Having every single meeting in a virtual setting, not ideal. But there have been some positive changes and really shown us like, hey, we can do a lot when we have to. We can do things, and we can still do our job, and we can still make sure that kids are safe, and, you know, we're making it through this. So it has some positives.
I really appreciate your comment with regard to understanding that there are new hires there, DFS, new workers, because they're also new CASAs. I'm a new CASA, and so just the learning curve for everybody, and just to kind of put it in perspective where you guys are coming from, where we're coming from, and also just to know that we're all really got the same goal in mind.
Yep.
So it does help.
Absolutely. I love that, because we all have to work together, because at the end of the day, if we don't work together, then we're not really factoring the best interest of the child. And that's, at the end of the day, that's our goal. Yeah. We want to make sure that these kids are safe. We want to make sure that we're not creating any more trauma than there needs to be. We want to try and help these families. Like I always say, I start this out with every single conversation with a family is, I'm not here to work against you. It's me and you against the problem. So if it's addiction, it's me and you against your addiction. If it's anything, it's us against that problem. How are we going to work together to overcome this? And you know, I think that if we all work together and try to do that, we're all just really putting that best interest of the child at the forefront.
I really like that you say that, Amanda, me and you versus the problem. It makes it, at least comes across to me, it sounds like you're on my team, you know, and we're doing this together. And it's not that, like you've said many times, you know, DFS is not out to take kids. Like that is not your goal at all. The goal is to keep kids safe. And how do we keep kids safe? We address the problem and the roots of the situation. So it's good that that's a cool way to say that.
Yeah. I mean, we have a bad rap. I mean, no, trust me, I do this. I don't want somebody knocking on my door saying, hey, I'm here with Child Protective Services. Like, what's going on in your house? I don't want that. So I really try to think like, hey, I'm a mom. I have a 9-year-old. So I want to know, like, I want to come across as, hey, like, I understand, like, being a parent's hard. Like, what can we do to make this better for you? You know, I don't ever want to come across as I'm the enemy, because I don't get anywhere with families if they think I am their number one enemy. If they think that when I walk through that door, my goal is to take Johnny away and put him with a foster family, you know, they're not going to work with me. They're not going to get the help and services that they need. So it really is breaking barriers, and maybe things could have been done that way 10, 15 years ago. Maybe that was what DFS was like, or Child Protective Services as a whole. But really, with like being trauma informed and with the knowledge that we have now, the resources that we have now, that's really not the case. So it's really changing that mindset and changing how we're viewed in society and with these families. You know, especially here in Newcastle County, you know, we have to break through a lot of barriers. and we have to make people comfortable with our involvement. Sometimes people come from different states, and different states do things a lot differently than we do here in Delaware. Maybe I'm biased because this is where we work and this is where we live, but I think that Delaware is really ahead of the game. We really are trauma informed, and we really try very hard to change that and break that mold. So when they're coming from different states and have had a bad experience, it's really trying to show them, hey, I know that in Jersey maybe this happened to you, or you came from Kentucky and this is how it was, but it's not how we do things here. This is what we do. So it's a lot of barrier breaking and trust building.
Yeah. I'm sure you get a lot further with that trust building and the kindness and patience and empathy than if you came at it, without those skills.
For sure.
How has participation in PPA, preliminary protective hearings, and adjudicatory hearings since they're virtual? Is participation still pretty good?
So sometimes I actually think it makes it better because people might have like pending charges, warrants. So maybe some of those parents who are afraid to step into the courthouse for fear of like, oh my God, if I go to the courthouse, I'm getting arrested today. Those parents are more likely to hop on a Zoom because they're not getting arrested. They don't have that fear looming over them, or they don't have to stop and pay their fines on their way out of the courthouse. So I think that it's been, I mean, I haven't had a single case in which the parents have not showed up virtually. And I'm trying to think of how to phrase this appropriately, but I think that this has allowed the courts and everybody involved to also see people in their natural element, which is, it speaks volumes of how people are on their Zoom. Really kind of paints a picture of what things might be like. So that has been an interesting and unique aspect to Zoom hearings.
You know what? You're not the first person I've heard that from, but I take it as a positive thing, because you do get a feel for the family home or the dynamics or the relationships, and yeah, that's a unique way to look at it. And I think I take it positively, at least, that it get the feeling of what it's like.
Yeah.
Cool. I want to say one more thing about visitation. I actually just recorded a podcast that will be coming out next Friday on June 11th, talking about reasonable efforts. But part of our reasonable efforts discussion, we talked about visitation and kind of what has occurred during the pandemic, especially the early days, where, we didn't know what we were dealing with necessarily, and how quickly Division of Family Services, CASAs, and foster parents were able to set up and permit, and allow and supervise virtual visits. And while virtual visits are no replacement for in-person eyes on face-to-face, they might continue to be, as they've sort of become a supplemental visitation option. So so for CASAs, I want you to think, if your family, if your parents have a once a week visit with their child in person, is there some way that we can continue to supplement some virtual contact throughout the week? Short and frequent, it doesn't have to be hours long, but I'm thinking, just made me think a little bit of like, hey, could we do a 5-minute, good night FaceTime, or, something like that. So
yeah, I love that. I would like to see that kind of stuff continue, because really for quite some time, we've really been back to in person, unless there was some type of health restriction or reason regarding COVID why we shouldn't, or if it was just like a true safety concern why the parents should not be there. We've really picked up back to where we used to be with the visits. But I would like to see that continue, because I think it also garners interest and hope. It makes parents feel more hopeful that, hey, I get to see my kid. Even if it's just for 5 minutes on a FaceTime, I get to say, hey, I love you. I miss you. I'm thinking about you. It helps the kids remain hopeful. And it's buy-in for the parents. Like I can't imagine being told one, I can't see my kid, or I'm only allowed to see them supervised once a week. I can't imagine that. So, you know, being able to keep those virtual contacts and those little things to keep them going, you know, sometimes I think that shuts parents down. Like, oh, what's the point? I'm only going to see my kid once a week, and DFS is against me, the judge is against me. No one cares about what I have to say. Little things might help keep them involved and keep the prize right there in their face. Like, their prize is getting their child back. That's their ultimate goal. That's what they want, the light at the end of the tunnel. So having that accessible to them, it will keep them going.
Yeah. And it's good knowing, you know, that those virtual visits are not instead of those in-person visits, but it's in addition to. And like you said, Amanda, like you see your child once a week for an hour or two. What if we supplemented with some 5 to 10 minute, you know, FaceTimes here and there?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great idea to just keep suggesting that. I mean, we've had to find these workarounds, but there's nothing to say that we can't keep using some of these things. There's nothing to say like, hey, this is working really well. Like, let's just continue to use it. This is going to help the investigation. This is going to help the treatment. This is going to help the cost. Like, this is going to garner more interest, more, you know, like more hope, more feeling of accomplishment. It's going to really help the situation be better for everybody involved.
Right, and those quick visits, you know, aren't necessarily just biological parents. It could be grandma, it could be an older sibling or a younger sibling. You know, it could be somebody else that's connected to the child. And if we can just provide some way of positivity and some connection, you know, whether that person's able to be a resource or not, at least they're involved in that child's life. And if we could you know, facilitate some contact, that might be helpful.
Absolutely.
Cool. Did any of that spark any final questions from anybody? Awesome. Amanda, thank you so much for your time. I truly, truly appreciate it.
Well, thank you. And I appreciate you guys and everything that you guys do and the amount of help that you guys do provide to us. We do really value your input and your help. So just know that. I mean, I personally appreciate you guys. I look forward to talking to you. One of you will probably be assigned to me later today. So, I mean, I hope to work with you all in the future. And like I said, I put my email in the chat. If you guys think of something later tonight, like that's always what happens to me. I'll be laying in bed and at 11 o'clock at night, I'll be like, oh, why didn't I ask that question? Please feel free to send me an email or give me a call. And I'm always willing to talk things out or give input, advice, answers where I can. And if I don't know them, I'm willing to always find the answer for you.
Wonderful, Amanda. Thank you so much. So everybody, this was our first of our 3-part series. So for the month of June, instead of each county receiving the same training, we're changing up a little bit. So this is our first session of Investigation Unit. And then next week will be on Wednesday. So session 2 will be our treatment worker, our treatment unit. And then our final session will be our permanency unit. So we're doing each of the, you know, 1, 2, and 3 of the units as a case works its way through the 3 units within Division of Family Services. So our next in-service is not duplicative of today's training. It's a totally separate training, but focused on treatment. We're gonna have a treatment worker come present and talk about the treatment and reunification services. Yes, Joyce. Oh, sorry, Janice.
Is it going to be even on, you said next week, next Wednesday, same time?
No, it's going to be a different time. It's going to be 10 o'clock on Wednesday, the 9th.
Okay.
So it's from 10 to 12 on June 9th, and then Monday, June 17th from 2 to 4. So it's the typical Newcastle, Kent, and Sussex in-service time. So today is our typical Newcastle County in-service, where it's the first Thursday of the month from 2 to 4. And then Sussex is always the second Wednesday of the month from 10 to 12. And then Kent County is the third Monday from 2 to 4. So we stayed in our time frames. We're just messing with the presentations a little bit.
But you're going to put this in your Friday. Usually you do your Friday email.
Yep, absolutely. So the link will be included, and you don't have to RSVP for it. You can just do what you did today, is just click on the link when it's time for that training.
Okay.
Lauren, will you be recording those other ones also? Because I know I can't make those, but I'm interested in them. So
yes, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So, and then once they're recorded, once I can put them on our YouTube channel, then I can go ahead and do that. And then you can watch them whenever you're able to.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a great afternoon.